Okay. What's up? It's Dre Smith for our people, June 15th, 2020. We're going to call this the Denmark VC Day episode. Denmark VC's revolution in South Carolina should be marked for June 16th, right? There's actually a book, since we're all about books here, that I wanted to mention relating to Denmark VC, the buried story of America's largest slave rebellion. And I want to give a shout out to Michael Coard, Michael X, the brother, the people's lawyer in here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Shout out to Michael Coard. Shout out to WURD Radio. And once again, this is for our people coming at you every week, Mondays, repping for Hakim's Bookstore, West Philly, 210 South 52nd Street, right between Walnut and Chancellor. Right, so as we're opening up, as we're coming out of the caves, coming out of our homes in this day of pandemic, stay safe. But also make sure you check us out at Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, between Walnut and Chancellor. Check out the brother Chris. Chris is Yvonne. Yvonne Blake, the owner of the store, carried it on from her father, Dawood Hakim, since 1959, second oldest black bookstore in the country. Shout out to all the black bookstores around the country. We're going to save our black institutions. We're going to save our black educational institutions, including our black bookstores. So starting with this one, I want you to go to GoFundMe.com/HakimsBookstore and donate what you can. Regardless of the pandemic, in order for black institutions, educational institutions to serve our communities, we're going to, as a people, have to fund them so they can do more than just sell books, so that they can expand their operations and be the connections for our homeschoolers, for our after schoolers, for enrichment programs and all those other things. We have to be the educational lighthouses of our neighborhoods. If everything's going online, that's great. But there still needs to be community, as we see going on right now. It's going to be a sense of community that gets us through all of this BS. So check us out also on HakimsBookstore.com, Hakim's Bookstore Facebook Live, Hakim's Bookstore on YouTube, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram, and also check out my personal YouTube page, AfrolanticanJurisprudence. You can find these videos. You can find my videos every week or podcasts on the Economic Justice Law Review for those that are interested in race, economic justice, and the law. We're going to do some other podcasts pretty soon. Stay in tune for that. Shout out to the African Sports Venture Group, Yolanda Thompson, Leslie Caroma, Roz Gordon, everybody involved with that. All right, but you know our focus here. I am Andre Smith, Dre Smith, Smitty Bonton. I'm your scholar in residence, and my job for our people is to bring black books from academia, right, to the people. We're going to add a segment at some point where we're going to do fiction books, literature, and I hope to recruit Miss Aaron Brooks to do that. However, while I'm running this particular piece of the program, we're focusing on these nonfiction academic books, enrich the mind scholastically, right? All right, so before we get into that, let me first, before we get into the books, go to the sciencechannel.com. We want to talk about what white people can do, or not just white people, what other people can do to help. First of all, you can give us Egypt, right? Give us Egypt, right? And no, I don't mean give it to us, it's ours, right? Recognize it. So there is almost brought to tears this weekend because a program, season 1, episode 7 of the Science Channel. Yeah, I looked it up. Unexplained and Unexplored, right? It's a series on ancient history, using maps and current artifacts and tracing things that were heretofore unknown, or at least unknown to the masses. And so they look for the origins of Egypt, and so they acknowledge, this is the first show I've ever seen, that acknowledge, number one, what they call the Zero Dynasty Kings, or basically Cemetery El, which is in Kastul, which is south of Egypt, and that they had a pharaonic culture before the kings and queens of Egypt. This is referenced by Bruce Williams in the Oriental Institute. It's repeated by Diop and Yochanan. And shout out to all those brothers, John Henry Clark, that fought the good fight, because without getting recognition, still your theories, your explanations, your theses, are being proved correct. Dr. Asa Hilliard, everybody, Martin Bernal. So in this particular episode, they recognize those that the immediate predecessors of ancient Egypt existed further south, that they have cemeteries and they had wealth and basically governed a jurisdiction of impressive length, uncertain length, but there's some goods in those cemeteries that suggest that its reach was vast and wide. Moreover, they also then pivot from that archaeological find to Hatshepsut's expeditions to the ancient land of the gods, which they believe to also be the origins of Egypt, that the land of the gods represents where Egypt has come from. So the first clue would be immediately south in Kastul. Cemetery L is what a lot of people call it, and ancient historians call it like the A group and the C group, but that stuff doesn't hold water. But even further than that, through Hatshepsut's fascination with history and the origins of Egypt. Hatshepsut, of course, one of the greatest queens in the history of mankind, one of the greatest rulers in the history of mankind, whose empire who expanded the Egyptian empire from as far as Ethiopia and perhaps even further south, all the way up to Greece, right? The tax, again, we should have the tax records and all that to show that they controlled all of these vast empires. All these far-flung places within their empire, and that she took an expedition back to their origins, back to the land of the gods, which the inscriptions say is Punt, right? Punt being in Ethiopia, and they also went south towards Punt, or Ethiopia, and discovered temples that date back to that time period that would be referred to. In other words, over 6,000 years ago. So there are other evidences, there's other proofs that show, or circumstantially, that Nubia, Kush, Ethiopia, Punt, however you want to describe these countries to the south of Egypt, were the progenitors of their civilization. And I always go back to a writing by James Wilson and Aristide Theodorides about their legal complex, that their commitment to due process, their commitment to equal protection had to be part of a civilization prior to them, because it was so well developed through the 6 dynasties, right? That it was so elaborate that it couldn't have been just immediate. Now, I'm sure they wrote it to suggest that some white folks or Europeans or aliens instituted it, but we also know that that means that as civilization grew up further south on the Nile, in other words, and of course that's the higher region that had flowed down the Nile, as civilization flowed down the Nile, so did agriculture, which means from agriculture you get law, from law you get taxes, from taxes you get a state, right? And you flow all the way down through Upper Egypt, then Lower Egypt, then out towards the world and all that other good stuff. So, great episode, Unexplored and Unexplained, on the Science Channel, channel 622 on Verizon. If you got it, it's been a lifesaver for me as a sports fan, looking for other ways to spend my time. Maybe I'll try to stick with it even when sports comes back. All right. But and also, you know what? If we're going to big up the ancient, not the ancient, but the recent past Afrocentric scholars, Sheikh Anta Diop, Joseph Van Yakinen, Theophilus Benga, John Henry Clark, Asa Hilliard, all these brothers and sisters, Marie Andy, Cicely Dungy Houston, right? Those wonderful Ethiopians, for all the brothers and sisters that paved the way, that took the heat, and dared to say in mixed company that Egypt was African, that it was a black civilization, that it represents our greatness. Shout out to Dr. Greg Carr. I've also, again, he is the chairman of Howard University's Africana Studies program. Shout out to Melefe Asante. Shout out to all those folks. But let me see, I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Greg Carr, because he is also doing what we're trying to do here, is bring that knowledge out of the towers of academia into the people. So I would like everyone who happens to come across this show to also check out Karen Hunter and Dr. Greg Carr, or it's the Karen Hunter show, but Dr. Greg Carr is often a guest on her show, and he is just fantastic. He is a certified Egyptologist. He's on the chairman of the boards or an executive committee of the Association for the Study of Classic African Civilizations. Just a phenomenal brother, a tremendous scholar, and he was just breaking down Dave Chappelle's, that's why I brought him up. He was breaking down Dave Chappelle's recent video. I'm not going to call it a comedy special because it wasn't comedy, but his recent speaking out on 846. Shout out to Dave Chappelle, shout out to Karen Hunter, shout out to Greg Carr, shout out to all the activists. Big ups to everybody that's trying to move the movement forward. I can talk at length about my feelings about the movement, but that's not what we came here for. I'll interject it when I think it's necessary, but we'll talk about that at perhaps another time. But shout out to everybody that is part of the Black Lives Matter movement. As I said last week, I do believe the end result will be positive in terms of defunding the police, right? For reasons of what I call interest convergence, in that defunding the police not only takes the knees off of black people's necks, so to speak, it also lowers taxes for wealthy white folks, right? It lowers the cost of government. And when black rights converge with saving white people or white corporations or elite white folks money, that's when things happen. That's when the team comes together, right? For good or for bad. It's an observation. It's not saying that's the way it ought to be or should be, just saying that's what I predict will happen. Now, you know what? So let's go back to the theme of today. As much as we are talking about civil rights here, we're talking about police brutality, we're talking about defund the police. I want to talk about Denmark Vesey Day, and I chose that kind of sarcastically, but not really. I want to celebrate it. We need to know about the brother. We need to know about not just Nat Turner or Stono's rebellion in 1730s, the rebellions that were down in the Maroons in Jamaica. We need to know about all these resistance movements worldwide if we're going to appreciate blackness as a Pan-African construct. The Dolly Panthers, everybody all around the world. The Zanj, who rose from slavery in Iraq to take over and start a whole country on the Persian Gulf. You may not know about that. I'll talk about that later. Write a book about it too. But so we want to learn about all the resistance movements, and I couple that with the resistance movement that's going on right now. I find it interesting that I could have named this Juneteenth Day, right? Could have Denmark Vesey Day, June 16th, Juneteenth, June 19th, the day it is reported that former slaves or enslaved people in Texas finally got the word that they were free. Although, let's recognize that slavery, as according to Douglas Blackman and all those that talked about sharecropping and convict leasing, did not in fact end until the 1940s, until the federal government actually started locking people up for keeping slaves. Then we can't really say that slavery was abolished. That it was officially abolished by law, true. That it was recognized by enslaved people in Texas, that it was known at that point, June 19th. Okay. However, that is not cloud or let's not support the illusion of inclusion to the extent that we don't recognize that slavery did in fact exist formally as slavery, informally as sharecropping and convict leasing throughout the Jim Crow South until at least the 40s and the 50s. And because of economic circumstances, we find that many of our people are faring no better today than then, and also that convict leasing or involuntary servitude is still permitted by the 13th Amendment for the duly convicted. And we're going to see those work crews, or we are seeing those work crews return when we talk about private prisons, the prison industrial complex, and how Starve the Beast created the Black Lives Matter movement. All right, so I say all that to say, let's celebrate Juneteenth. I find it interesting that the NFL, the Nike are giving it paid holidays, and you would think that if you're going to talk about reparations for black people, yeah, those are some of the first CEOs that need to put a whole lot of money in the kitty. Even white CEOs, if corporations would all put money in the kitty for reparations, you put in some voluntarily, you know they'd all be looking at Nike and the NBA and the NFL like, now you know you need to put up, right? Tobacco companies, right? Philip Morris, put up that dough. You know you got enough, plenty out of black folks over the last couple hundred years. Now, what I find interesting about this, and I just wanted to make a quick point about this, is I never saw, it caught me by surprise because I had not seen a lot of talk and conversation within black circles about making Juneteenth a national paid holiday, right? So it's interesting to me how that movement occurred within private circles. Yeah, I'm a cynic, yeah, I'm skeptical, and I'm not mad at it. I'll big them up. I'll feel a little better about buying Nikes. I'll feel a little better about watching the NBA and to the NFL to a smaller extent. You know what I'm talking about. But I say all of that to say that it was interesting that nobody, no corporate, no Democrat, nobody asked permission for yesterday, June 14th, to be Obama Day. And yet it was. Everywhere on social media, I'm seeing pictures of Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, the family, and just Obama Day, Obama Day, Obama Day. I guess instead of Flag Day or President's Day, I don't know. But Joseph Ben-Yakinen said the same thing about Martin Luther King Day. He's happy that we got it. He's very proud of the campaign, Stevie Wonder, and everybody. At the same time, why ask permission? Take the day, right? The daily is holy to you, take it. Let me say one more thing about Juneteenth celebrations before we talk again about black books. The key here is we're supposed to be talking about black books, right? We're talking about black academics, black scholarship, black intelligence from the ivory tower to the people. And here you hear me just talking like I'm in a classroom. But I do want to say this last thing about Juneteenth celebrations and other communal economic programs that I'm seeing going on around right now. First of all, let me say that beware of economic cooperatives that are Ponzi schemes and scams, right? Let's first of all not be so enthusiastic and susceptible to wealth building strategies that we give our money to those who are using this opportunity to scam us out of money in a Ponzi scheme, some Amway thing. I'm not a fan of multi-level marketing. Maybe it's not a scam per se. Maybe it's not a Ponzi scheme per se. But I believe that we are much better than that, that we can actually produce the best in goods and services and get paid for that. So if that's what your economic collective is about, then I want to hear all about it. Then I want to hear promote it. However, if it's just a way to recycle the money without investing it first, then that's a whole different story. That said, I've also been aware of other movements about black boycotts. I love boycotts. My very first law review article that I published was in the Howard Law Journal in 2000, and it was about how consumer boycotts by black folks often are more effective than civil litigation. And I think that's borne out by the further retrenchments of the civil rights laws, while at the same time, economic pressure, whether you call it shaming, outing, cancel culture, whatever, has produced more results in basically boycotting or even threatening to boycott highly leveraged economic institutions seems to promote change. So I'm always with a boycott. But here's what I say all that to say: picking one specific day and picking one or picking a couple institutions to boycott, to me, is symbolic, wonderful, but we have to move on to the substance. So what I think we ought to do, and you've heard me mention this on the show, I do this every November, and I carry it forward probably to the end of the year, and then it peters out. But every Friday should be Black Friday. Say it again. Every Friday should be Black Friday, where we spend money at a Black-owned institution, Black-owned business or Black-owned institution, or don't spend money at all, right? So circulate the dollars within the community, build up human, social, and political and financial capital by coming together and building. Now, I know some people will say you'll cite Mercer Baradaran, you'll cite Jared Ball. Oh, those things are worthless. Or you might even cite Frank Wilderness, the author Afro-Pessimist. Oh, those things won't conquer white supremacy. Da, 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 da. Nobody said it would, right? You're answering a question that nobody asked, that nobody's stupid enough to think that recirculating the dollar in our economy is going to close the racial wealth gap and make Black people all of a sudden as wealthy as white people. However, what it will do is help us do more than less. Period. Right? To do more, to have more than less. We know the system is set up against us. We know the system is set up to extract capital. We know about the whole the capital class versus the working class and all that other stuff. Okay, but in reality, in real people's lives, can we do more with less or more with more? Right? Even if your thing is political organizing, he who pays the piper names the tune. We know this, right? Citizens United. Every study in the books says that how politics follows the money first, the people second, right? That's the heart and the essence of interest convergence theory by Derek Bell, right? If you go back to the founders of this generation, they knew what righteousness and justice and equality, they wrote it in the document. And yet they didn't follow through because of the money, right? So, when we talk about economic empowerment, we talk about Kujichagulia, when we talk about Ujama, when we talk about Ujima, when we talk about saving Black bookstores, we're not talking about, you can call it baby capitalism if you want. There is a distinction between capital and capitalism. Capital does not disappear just because you're in a socialist society. Capital does not disappear because you're in a communist society. Those societies deal with capital differently. Communism, the state controls all of the capital. It doesn't disappear. Socialism, capital is redistributed through the state. It doesn't disappear. And so the fair racial distribution of capital is not guaranteed in communism. It's not guaranteed in socialism. Neither is it guaranteed in capitalism. So it will always be on us to make our way and have more than less. So if somebody can convince me that we can do more with less than we can with more, then we need to better educate ourselves and our children, start to patronize Black businesses and institutions, and stop unduly criticizing each other. Especially when neither one of us, none of us has the single silver bullet. There is not one, there's no magic spell that any one of us are going to have to defeat white supremacy. It's going to take, it took quadrillions of microaggressions to get us here. It'll take quadrillions of micro-corrections to bring us back to equality over a long, long period of time. All right? But what else you got better than this? All right, we'll talk about some books. Let's talk about some books. The first book I want to mention some old books. I'm always talking about new books, so let me mention some old books real quick. Invisible No More, Andrea Ritchie. So we're talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about Tamir Rice. We're talking about Mike Brown, Eric Garner. We're talking about George Floyd. We're talking about Ahmaud Arbery. We're talking about both of John. But what we're not talking about, or not talking about enough, is Breonna Taylor, Joyce Cornell, right? Corinne Gaines, Sandra Bland, right? So Invisible No More is a book that stands up there with Ben Crump's Open Season, that stands there with Paul Butler's Chokehold, that stands with particularly Angela Davis policing the black man, right? Black women are abused by police, and there are statistics that say more often than black men when you include sexual assault. Okay? Now, maybe when it comes to death by shooting, black men may be targeted more. But when we talk about violence against black people, right, then we have to include sexual assault. So I hate to have to remind you about that disgusting video about 3-4 years ago where the cop raped the black woman on the side of the road under the pretense of searching for drugs in her vagina. Disgusting. For over 12 minutes on camera, and I don't believe there's been no arrest, there were no protests. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Right? And that's not even the word I want to use right now. So, Andrea, I'm going to just leave it there at that. Andrea Ritchie, Invisible No More, on police violence against black women, homosexual, trans. Again, that we have to expand the cipher, right? That I tend not to join your organization if it excludes black people. So that means if it excludes Caribbeans, Africans, or whatever, focuses on African Americans, I'm probably not going to join. I'll support you, do your thing, but I need to conserve my resources, which includes my time and energy. And then also when it comes to black men versus black women, yeah, I'm a Q. Right? I joined a fraternity and all that. I understand that there's differences and distinctions. I understand that we need to huddle up sometimes to have internal conversations. At the same time, most organizations, most movements, whatever, I'm not going to join them unless it's about black people. Black people. All right? I understand the intersectionality. I get it. I get it. Kimberly Crenshaw, I get it. Right? However, I'm not going to play my blues is better. My blues is deeper than yours. Right? Black people. All right. So, Invisible No More, Andrea Ritchie, 2000. I think that was 2017. Another book that we need to be talking more about, 2017. Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. This book was published in 2017, and the reason why I think it's significant is because this is written about England, right? Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. Exploring everything from eradicating black history to the inextricable link between class and race. Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race is the essential handbook for anyone who wants to understand race relations in Britain today. Okay? So the reason I think this is exceptionally poignant right now is because we see these protests about white supremacy around the world. Yes, George Floyd in the United States is at the pinnacle. They're the poster child, we're the symbol for it. But these protests in all these other countries are against global white supremacy. There's no mistake about it. Shout out to the brother, the author of, what's the book? I have it on my shelf. When We Rule, Robin Walker. Great historian, great scholar, and also appreciates how much the amassing of capital is indispensable to black liberation, along with our improvement on the political scene. All right. So those are the older books that we wanted to feature today that came to mind. Again, going back to Unexplored and Unexplained, please get the Myth, Sheikh Anta Diop's African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality. Get Ben Joseph Yakinen's Africa, the Mother of Civilization. Go get Mark Bernal's Black Athena. I mean, the list goes on. Basil Davidson. The list goes on and on and on. John Jackson, LaRon Bennett. Go all the way back to David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. Back in, I think that's 1817. He knew that Egypt was black even back then. Imagine being in slavery times, 1817, and you know that black people created the greatest civilization on earth, only to be regarded as inferior by people who remember If you're in Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, own it. The people that are enslaving you, the overseers, are illiterate. Illiterate, right? Have no sense of math. Let me stop. All right, so let's get to the books going on right now. That came out this week. You know, we always run down the list from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, their weekly book digest, or book presentation. Let me say this: I have not read all of these books. I know sometimes people ask me about this particular book, and I can tell them about it. And some of them I have. I think that some of them are so fantastic, I got to get them. But this is my way of staying abreast of what's out there. So I know the movements. I know if I want to get something. But no, I have not read all of these books. So let me just make that clear from the beginning. But this one book I think everybody should get. This is not a book just for scholars. This is the type of book that cannot stay in the halls of academia, that has to go out to the people. It's called The Court-Martial of Jackie Robinson, The Baseball Legends Battle for Civil Rights During World War II by Michael Lee Lanning. It's published by Stackpole Books. I don't even know that outfit, but it seems well produced. I haven't bought it. I haven't read it yet, but the story seems something like I just have to have. And for those of you, a lot of you parents and all that are looking to continue homeschooling your kids, need these type of stories to enthrall your kids, especially when you get to like the teenage years, right? Your word is their command, you know, when they're a little younger, but when they're getting to that mid adolescent stage, you're going to need some stuff that really tugs at their interest. So let me give you the description as it's written. 11 years before Rosa Parks resisted going to the back of the bus. Hold on, let me start that again. Rewind. 11 years before Rosa Parks resisted going to the back of the bus, a young black second lieutenant, hungry to fight Nazis in Europe, refused to move to the back of a U.S. Army bus in Texas and found himself court-martialed. The defiant soldier was Jackie Roosevelt Robinson, already in 1944 a celebrated athlete in track and football, and in a few years the man who would break Major League Baseball's color barrier. This was the pivotal moment in Jackie Robinson's pre-MLB career. Had he been found guilty, he would not have been the man who broke baseball's color barrier. Had it never happened, he would have gone overseas with the Black Panther Tank Battalion, and who knows what after that. Having survived this crucible of unjust prosecution as an American soldier, Robinson, already a talented multi-sport athlete, became the ideal player to integrate baseball. This is a dramatic story, deeply engaging and enraging. It's a Jackie Robinson story, a baseball story, but it's also an Army story as well as an American story. Wow, I didn't know that. Right? I didn't know that. So that's one of the big things that this book, this podcast, this show is about, is bringing books like this to the people. Very shortly, before the end of the year, we're going to have to master Zoom or live stream or whatever, because we're going to have to get somebody, Michael Lee Lanning, on and actually let these authors talk about these books themselves. Wouldn't that be dope? Right? To couple this, to follow this up with the show more precisely talking to this author about his work. All right? So The Court-Martial of Jackie Robinson, The Baseball Legends Battle for Civil Rights During World War II by Michael Lee Lanning, Stackpole Books. After that, we got A Long, Long Way, Hollywood's Unfinished Journey from Racism to Reconciliation by Greg Garrett, Oxford University Press. This is not from a black or Afrocentric scholar, so it's very interesting, especially in this day and time when we're asking allies to do things that are, quote-unquote, anti-racist. So the description of this book suggests that it is published in that vein, I assume. A Long, Long Way incorporates both cinematic and religious truth-telling to the subject of race and reconciliation. In acknowledging the racist history of America's national art form, Garrett offers the possibility of hope for the future. And so basically he's going all the way back to the birth of the nation and then bringing it all the way forward to Jordan Peele and whatnot to talk about the advancement of progress, right? To talk about progressives that they believe in the hard-fought progress towards a more moral and just society, right? All right. Next book. Oh, again, this one is a good one, especially for your homeschoolers, especially if we're going to talk about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, especially if we talk about Black Wall Street in Greenwood, North Carolina. There are lots of places around this country where black people flourish, and then jealousy. No, I'm not even going to call it jealousy. Economic competition, right? It's always at the heart. Some people will always talk about there will be some trigger that triggers a massacre, such as an allegation of rape or what have you. But the tension behind it almost always starts economically. So, for example, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street sat on top of oil, right? So once oil is discovered under your land, just like the Native Americans and all that, they're coming for it. And whether it's under a pretense or not. So understanding the details behind some of these massacres is absolutely crucial. So this next book is called Blood in Their Eyes, the Elaine Massacre of 1919, right? A lot of people talk about the Red Summer of 1919 all across the country. So put it in that context also with the riots in LA, in Houston, etc. This is by Grif Stockley as editor, so it's a collaborative piece with essays by several scholars. It's published by the University of Arkansas Press, which makes sense. On September 30th, 1919, local law enforcement in rural Phillips County, Arkansas, attacked black sharecroppers at a meeting of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. Also, remember to check out Jessica Nemhard Gordon's Collective Courage, because she talks about black sharecropping unions and farmers unions and progressive buying institutions and whatnot that eventually came under attack for their success. So again, law enforcement attacked black sharecroppers at a meeting of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. The next day, hundreds of white men from the Delta, along with U.S. Army troops, converged on the area with blood in their eyes, quote unquote. What happened next was one of the deadliest incidents of racial violence in the history of the United States, leaving a legacy of trauma and silence that has persisted for more than a century, right? We're actually past the 100-year mark. So we're going to talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, talk about Greenwood, North Carolina, talk about all these different places that were successful, that strove and made a march towards their capital accumulation to their slice of American pie. Can't leave any out, and this is one that definitely needs to be recalled and remembered. They also listed Contraband Guides, Race, Transatlantic Culture, and when I say they, the National the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, JBHE.com. Contraband Guides, Race, Transatlantic Culture, and the Arts in the Civil War Era by Paul A. Kaplan. I think we already did that. I think they featured that maybe about 6 weeks ago, I think. So let's move on. Like Wildfire, The Rhetoric of the Civil Rights Sit-ins, edited by Sean Patrick O'Rourke and Leslie K. Pace, out of University of South Carolina Press. In Like Wildfire, editors Sean Patrick O'Rourke and Leslie Pace seek to clarify and analyze the power of civil rights sit-ins as rhetorical acts, persuasive campaigns designed to alter perceptions of apartheid social structures and to change the attitudes, laws, and policies that supported those structures. These cohesive essays from leading scholars offer a new appraisal of the origins, growth, and legacy of the sit-ins, which has gone largely ignored in scholarly literature. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, you do hear a lot about the sit-ins, but you don't really hear a lot about their effect, their organization, an evaluation of them as a tactic, where they occurred, right? Maybe there needs to be a national sit-in map, right? Maybe we need to go to all the different places where there used to be sit-ins and see whether black folks are welcome there now. All right. There was a lot of books published this past week. Racial Ambivalence, Race in Flannery O'Connor by Angela Aliamo O'Donnell. This is out of Fordham University Press. I have to admit, I do not know the writer Flannery O'Connor. Apparently she is out of a Southern writer out of Georgia of some renown, and has written about on race. And I find this book interesting. Let me read this blurb from it and tell you why I find it interesting. In one of her letters, O'Connor frankly expresses her double-mindedness regarding the social and political upheaval taking place in the United States with regard to race. And she says this: I hope that to be of two minds about some things is not to be neutral. Radical ambivalence explores this double-mindedness and how it manifests itself in O'Connor's fiction. And so what that says to me is, this is an interesting book about white folks as allies and the requirement of purity, right? The assumption that in order to be a white ally, or in order to be able to use white people, I use that word specifically, they have to be of pure character. That, and again, I am one that's more economically based, and so I, on the other hand, you can look and say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now, this is suggesting that Flannery O'Connor was somewhere in between these two poles, not necessarily enemy and not necessarily pure of heart. So the idea, or the question becomes, which is not a question to me, but I guess it's a question to some, is whether to accept their help or not. What part in the movement do they play? How do they become allies if their goal is not necessarily to become anti-racist or anti-racist as an individual? That maybe they want to perform an anti-racist act, but not that they're committing to be an anti-racist individual. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? So that's why I find this book, the book itself, I find it interesting, but within the context of strategy and the context of strategy and what to expect from white allies, what do you do with, quote unquote, racial ambivalence, right? People, there's a lot of white people that don't hate black people, don't like us either, don't give a damn one way or the other. Like the Flintstones or the Jetsons would probably prefer their whole day to go along without us, with or without us, doesn't care. All right. Moving on, there's another book, a couple other books. Say I'm Dead, a family memoir of race, secrets, and love by E. Dolores Johnson. Say I'm Dead is the true story of family secrets, separation, courage, and transformation through 5 generations of interracial relationships. So we're right past maybe the celebration of Loving versus U.S., that where the Supreme Court struck down laws against interracial marriage. This is about a family, I believe, that was chased out of Indiana for interracial marriage, and I want to say it hints towards perhaps even murder and the disappearance of white folks that could be accused of so-called race treachery and defying the anti-miscegenation laws. And that'd be an interesting book, right? The John, the John Browns of the world, right? What is white folks want to feel proud of themselves in the fight against racism? Okay. Be interesting. Put out a book of all the white martyrs that whose death has come mysteriously in racial circumstances due to their allegiance with black activists or people generally. Excuse me. The Healing Properties of the Blues by Sandra Foster. This woman has come up with the blues problem-solving method. The timeless nature of the exercises in this workbook allows them to be used endlessly for self-improvement, for practice with clients, or for professional presentations. Blues problem-solving method. I don't know. It's worth a look, especially for all you music fans. I appreciate music very much so, but I am not a musician. So, and lastly, Writing Across the Color Line, U.S. Print Culture and the Rise of Ethnic Literature, 1877 to 1920. Again, so these are all writers from 100 to 150 years ago, by Lucas A. Dietrich, University of Massachusetts Press. In his new book, Dietrich analyzes publishers' and writers' archives to show how authors, including Maria Amparo Ruiz de Burton, Charles W. Chestnut, Finley Peter Dunn, W. E. B. Du Bois, and Sui Sin Phar, drew readers into their text by subverting existing stereotypes and adapting styles of literary regionalism and dialect writing. Writing Across the Color Line details how this body of literature was selected for publication edited, manufactured, advertised, and distributed, even as it faced hostile criticisms and frequent misinterpretation by white readers. So this gives us a positive spin on those who broke through the color lines to become writers of not just literature, but scholarship, things that got into the press, the Jamel Hills, the Ralph Wileys, right? And I guess deals with the question of why these folks are even tolerated within a system of white supremacy. Why doesn't a system of white supremacy entirely smash them out? Or are we saying that white supremacy is not, seeks to be totalitarian, but isn't, right? That we present it as infallible, but it isn't, right? That there are cracks and gaps to exploit if you are in fact strategic. It does not negate the fact that white supremacy exists. It does not discount or dismiss the fact that it is the most powerful regulatory factor on the globe. However, to say that there's no agency outside of white supremacy is always a road too far for me to travel. So I'm going to stop right there. We've gone on long enough. Right, we'll be back next week with another list of books on For Our People. I am your host, Trey Smith, and as always, better educate ourselves and our children. Start and patronize black institutions, businesses, and institutions. Let's stop unduly criticizing each other, because that promotes the myth of black inferiority. Let's accumulate human, social, political, financial capital, because that is the revolution that will never, ever be televised. See you next week. Hotel.